2020 was a weird time for phones, and this phone proves that. This is the 2020 Motorola Razr. This was Motorola's first folding phone, and to my knowledge, one of the first publicly available folding phones in the United States. This phone was released around early 2020, and this phone was actually announced in 2019. This phone carried the Motorola Razr name from the early to mid 2000s, so it obviously had some expectations to live up to. So first off, this had this really nice design. This one's a little cracked, but that's besides the point. It followed the same design that the original Motorola Razrs did back in the 2000s, and it had this really nice kind of like metal plastic back. It had some weight to it, actually. It had these speaker grills down here. One note that I have is that this phone did not have any form of wireless charging. This was unfortunate because basically every phone back in 2020 had wireless charging in some form. You know, iPhones did, Google phones did, Samsung phones did, even other Motorola phones did, I believe, but not the Razr. So that was kind of the first exception that this phone had. And then it had this really nice front display. One big thing about this screen was the size. This phone had a much larger display than the later introduced Samsung Galaxy Z Flip series, which just had this small screen at the time. Since then, the Z Flip has gotten a pretty big screen. So about half of the phone is taken up by this camera area, and the other half is just the screen and the bezels. But I think that this phone looks pretty nice from this angle. It has the fingerprint reader down here on this separate bar, so whenever you're unlocking the phone from the cover screen, you can use the same fingerprint reader as when you're unlocking the phone from the inside screen. But this phone was not entirely amazing. A couple things that I have to note. The phone did not have the greatest hinge, so watch this. It snaps back really quickly, and it can't really hold a position like the Samsung Galaxy Z Flips could. I think the Z Flips actually got that feature later on, but the hinge just kind of felt really like floppy and just not great for, especially for the price that this phone was. And this phone didn't just have the middle crease, it had one at the top, one in the middle, and one on the bottom. This was weird, and also the screen, got scratches and chips really easily. Surprisingly, this screen is not cracked yet, but most of these phones ended up getting small chips and cracking the entire display. This looks like it probably happened from like a fingernail or something, and it almost went into the OLED and destroyed the phone. But the hinge sounds fine. It's a pretty satisfying phone to just flip open and closed. The hinge was miles worse than what Samsung had to offer. Also, there's no like branding or logos on the hinge. The only logo that this phone had is down here on the bottom, and it says Razr there as well. It's kind of cool, but I kind of think it would be nice if it said Razr right here, The specs were decent, it had pretty decent CPU, good RAM, it had USB-C, all the specs that you'd want for the time. I think it might have been like one CPU out of date or something like that, because I did hear a couple complaints about that. The camera system, not amazing from what I've heard. So unfortunately, this phone does not have a working camera. I don't know why. I don't know if it came unplugged or something. I just haven't really cared enough to fix it. And yeah, please restart camera to continue. This has happened since I got it in July. It's also got a notch up here at the top, which that's pretty cool. It's also got a like front-facing camera in the notch for some reason, even though you could just flip the phone around and use this for like video calls. But, it was pretty cool at the time. This was a pretty small notch also. This is, like, smaller than even the latest iPhone's Dynamic Island is. And it also had bezels around that notch. That's a little bit annoying. It's just a cutout, it's plastic. But it looks nice. It even blends into the top of the phone here, which I think looks really clean. But you know what I think really made this the worst folding phone ever? Just the general stupid decisions that Motorola made while designing this. So it's a pretty thin phone. And that's nice. This phone was eSIM only. That's not a SIM pin slot. That is a microphone. There's no SIM card slot, no SD card slot. It's only eSIM. I couldn't find any carrier that would be willing to activate this phone in 2024. While these phones were initially sold on Verizon Wireless, there is no way that I can find to activate this phone in 2024. It's really unfortunate, but this was an eSIM only phone. There's no way to put a SIM card in it. So Apple did not do that first. I guess Motorola did. And I get it, it's a thin phone, but they really couldn't find an area for a SIM card slot because this was when eSIM was really new. Phones got eSIM around 2018, 2019. This phone came out in 2020 and it was announced in 2019. Also, I said the hinge was nice, and I mean that. You know, it's okay. But this is a good area for dust to enter the phone. You can just see the mechanism right there. It's just exposed, and it literally has like a little gap there where dust and just debris can get in. And I'm surprised that this phone does not have any debris under the display itself. And this is plastic, scratched really easily, probably a bit easier than Samsung's phones. Also, it's kind of uncomfortable to have this weird ledge here. Even though I like this, it's kind of uncomfortable to have to deal with that, especially when you're watching stuff in like landscape mode. It's uneven, unsymmetrical. It's not really something that you'd want on your actual phone. It's more of a design showcase of a phone. And then the camera system, it only had a single camera. It wasn't amazing. It didn't really have the best photos for the time. It really was disappointing. Yeah, that's about all my complaints with this phone. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you enjoyed, like would be appreciated. And with that said, goodbye.